What was your relationship with Clayton Wilcox like, being the chief of staff, having to deal with him, if not on a daily basis, close to a daily basis? What was it like?
I had a very positive relationship with Dr. Wilcox. I was his chief engagement officer, and Laura Francisco served as our chief of staff, but I had a positive relationship. We interacted on a daily basis, in many instances, multiple times a day. And I know his wife very well and his children. And so we had a pretty good relationship.
Have you spoken to him since he turned in his resignation?
I have not had an opportunity. It has been a whirlwind over the past several weeks, and I'm sure that time will come. But for right now, our focus is August 26th, and that's opening schools with a bang. We want to make sure that all children have a highly effective teacher in every classroom. We want to make sure that all students, that bus, yellow bus, pulls up to the bus stop. We want to make sure that all of the support staff is in place. The grounds are looking immaculate. And so we're excited. We're excited about the start of this school year and what we will accomplish.
Do you plan on at some point reaching out to him, whether it's in a month or 2 months or whatever, after things have calmed down a little bit for you personally, trying to get in this new role? Do you plan on reaching out to him at all?
I certainly may. As I mentioned, my focus right now is on opening schools. That may happen, and I'm sure we may cross paths at a conference or two. Really my focus is on kids right now.
School security has been a big topic for a while, especially
Absolutely.
after the shooting at Butler last October, and then it was a run for a couple of months after that. It seemed like they were finding a gun somewhere in Mecklenburg County on campus, either middle school or high school. It seemed like every 3 weeks or so there was like another gun being found, where students were turning them in. And I know you guys have that saying, see something, say something.
Absolutely.
Which has been your number one defense, to be quite honest, I think. And tell me if I'm wrong on that, because I think and I've talked to some parents about this, and they all love the mobile metal detectors. They love the new dog, the gun sniffing dog, or the residue gun sniffing dog. But it's still, nothing prevents the gun from actually getting on campus. And they're a little worried that they might be reactionary instead of proactive. Because as it stands now, it might be you have to pick on the random checks the right school on the right day, the right classroom at the right time in order to find a gun. How much are you guys still looking at that, trying to say, what can we do to prevent the guns from actually on campus? Because as it stands now, nothing would have prevented Butler High School from happening.
What we're doing is we are constantly assessing all of the plans that we have in place. One of the things that we talk a lot about as part of our leadership team is this notion of continuous improvement. And so to the extent that there is a gap somewhere, then we are obligated to look at all facets of our organization to make sure that we're reducing those opportunities for gaps to exist. What I would also say is that something you mentioned earlier about our students. We have some very courageous students who, when they see something, they are saying something. And I want to encourage all of our students to continue with that practice, because if it were not for them coming forward, then, I hate to think about what could have happened. What I would also say is that what we're seeing in our schools in terms of some of the security things that are taking place are a reflection of our larger society. So this is something that plays out in schools, but 9 times out of 10, the issues don't start in schools. And so we have to be vigilant. We want to make sure that we're doing all that we can. Look, I have 2 kids in this system, and every time that I make a decision, the thought that comes to mind is this the right thing for all kids? One of our core values in CMS is being student-centered. And so we have to have that mindset when we're making decisions. But to the extent that we can have our families talk to their children about the importance of making sure that we are learning in an environment that is safe for all children, that's a message that I want to talk about more, because I believe we need to be proactive with this. And our families are our partners to help us in this journey.
I know everyone's been talking about the metal detectors full-time, especially at high schools and maybe even middle schools. 25 high schools, if I'm not mistaken, in Mecklenburg County. I know that's a massive undertaking. I know that's a massive, massive expense that's not easily just to say, okay, I want the money, and here it is. But is that still something that you think is ultimately going to be a possibility, whether it's next year or 2 years or sometime in your tenure?
So I remember you asked the question a few days ago, and you're very persistent, and I appreciate that. I was once in your shoes, and I had to demonstrate that same level of persistence and tenacity, so there's an appreciation for that. What I would say now is what I said then, is that all options are on the table. You know, if we find that there are gaps and we identify the proper solution, then we will move in that direction. But there are many factors to consider.
Yes.
Certainly, you have to look at the financial considerations, but you also have to look at logistically, how do you make this happen? And so those are conversations that we're having every day as part of our leadership team, as part of the conversations with our board members. And so rest assured, you know, I tell our families when I talk to them, you know, when I visit my daughter's schools or when we're at Girl Scouts, we're having conversations about all these things that are very important, that matter to families. But I know this, and I want to reassure families that August 26th, students will walk into a safe environment. They will walk into an environment that's welcoming and an environment that expects them, and will treat them accordingly.
It's funny that you brought up your reporter past, because I too worked at the Charlotte Observer as a reporter.
Oh my goodness! What
but
time frame?
But I was in sports.
You were in sports.
I was in sports. I was a sports reporter for about 20 years.
Okay.
Not just at the Observer, but that's why I was there for about 4 years.
Okay.
Which leads me to this, because you brought that up, and I think it's a really good question to ask.
Sure.
That a lot of people were concerned because you didn't have the administrative backgrounds in terms of, you know, assistant principal, high school principal, didn't spend much time in the classroom. And other people think that can actually be a positive to bring out fresh ideas that people who are, for lack of a better term, born and raised in the school systems never think outside the box. So how do you think that helps you as a superintendent bringing in outside ideas, considering that, you know, you weren't an assistant principal or a principal? Now, I know you've been in the school system 15 years,
Sure.
but I mean, but you still have outside ideas. And as a matter of fact, Mary McRae even said that. We want someone from this particular area. And so how does that help with you? What do you think you bring to that?
I think I bring a sense of energy, new ideas. I don't think like a traditional educator. I do want to respect my years in the classroom as a classroom teacher. Once a teacher, you're always a teacher. So I will always have that lens as part of my decision-making process. But I also think it's important to have other ideas. And so to the point that you made earlier about the traditional route, and I have a great deal of respect for those educators who came into this profession through the traditional route. But I also think it's important to acknowledge that there's more than one pathway to becoming a superintendent.
10 years ago, could you have imagined this? Like, are you even surprised? Like, I mean, you started out as a teaching journalism, being a reporter, and, you know, and I made the joke the other day, and I said, you know, I used to work at the Observer, you know, maybe I can, you know, do something like this in the next 5 or 6 years. But I mean, in all seriousness, looking back then, if you could talk to yourself 10 years ago and say, do you, just so you know, in 10 years from now, you're going to be the superintendent of CMS, would you believe that?
Well, this was certainly not in my 10-year plan.
Right.
But I do believe, and my faith teaches me that every position, everything that you do will prepare you for the next opportunity. And so I enjoyed being a reporter for 8+ years. I enjoyed being a teacher. I enjoy today being a parent. It's the most difficult, challenging, yet most rewarding job that I've ever had, and that is being a dad. But that it helps inform my thinking when I'm making decisions. And so it's, to me, I know that I have the experience, I have the confidence, I have built the relationships in this community where I call home. Did not grow up here, but this is home. And so, one of the things that I did this morning, I had the pleasure, and it was truly humbling, is I spoke to about 400 of our newest teachers, brand new to the profession. And one of the things that I was led to do as part of that conversation with our teachers is there's a letter that my mom wrote me 27 years ago. My mom is deceased now, but it's as if she never left me. And so there's a letter that she wrote my first semester in college at Ohio Wesleyan. And I took that letter out. I was in the attic looking for something, and I came across that letter. 27 years ago, she wrote that. And I think she wrote it, I had only been on campus for about a month, but I think in my voice, when I had spoken to her last, she felt that her baby was a little homesick, right? And so I was led to share that letter with our teachers today. What that letter did for me, and I hope it served the same purpose with our teachers, it gave me a sense of confidence. It gave me that jolt that you can do this. There will be some challenging days, but the challenging days will be outweighed by those rewarding days where you see that light bulb as a classroom teacher, you see that light bulb come on with your children. So I look forward to those days, but we will certainly tackle those challenging days head on as well.
Thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.